I will never forget the sound of that glass hitting the floor. It was sharp, almost violent, like something inside my father finally cracked. One second he was standing tall in his tailored Christmas suit, whiskey in hand, sneering at me in front of 50 guests. The next second his face turned gray. His fingers went limp. And the glass slipped from his hand and shattered across the polished hardwood right between the tree and the fireplace. The guests went silent. My brother froze mid-laugh. Even the music stopped. And all my father could manage was a breathless whisper as he stared at the paper in my hand. "Where did you get that?" But that his shock, his panic, that broken glass moment came later. It's not where the story begins. The story begins about 10 minutes earlier, with humiliation so deep I felt it in my bones. Christmas Eve had always been complicated in our family, but I still drove home every year. I was a Marine Corps officer, trained, disciplined, steady, but nothing could prepare me for stepping back into my father's house. Rank means nothing when you're facing the same man who taught you from childhood that you were unwanted. I pulled into the driveway just after dusk, still wearing my Marine Corps jacket from the long drive. The house was lit up with 1,000 white lights, the kind you only see in neighborhoods where the homeowners compete with each other. My father liked to show off, especially when his friends were watching. Inside the party was already loud laughter, clinking glasses, a roaring fire, expensive colognes and perfumes filling the air. My father's friends, retired business owners, golfers, country club regulars, were scattered everywhere, dressed in reds and greens like a catalog ad. Dad spotted me instantly, not with warmth, but with that familiar tight smirk that said he was already disappointed. "Well, look who finally made it," he announced loudly, drawing eyes to me. "The Marine." Some guests clapped politely, others didn't bother. My brother Daniel walked over first. Tall, handsome, charismatic. He had inherited everything from Dad, his looks, his charm, his confidence. The golden child. He hugged me, but lightly, the way someone hugs an acquaintance they don't want to wrinkle their shirt. "Hey sis, long drive?" he asked. 6 hours, I said. "Oof," he replied, already turning away. Dad clapped his hands together. "All right, everyone, let's get this started. Time for gifts." The room cheered. He loved performing. He loved having an audience. We all stepped toward the massive Christmas tree decorated in gold and white. Beneath it were dozens of gifts wrapped with elaborate bows. But Dad went straight for the biggest one, a huge red-wrapped box almost the size of a refrigerator. He motioned to Daniel. "Come on, son. This one's for you." Guests pulled out their phones. My stomach tightened. Dad led everyone to the driveway where the December air felt sharp and cold. And there it was, a glossy black Maybach S680 parked beneath a spotlight gleaming like liquid midnight. Daniel's mouth dropped open. "Dad, no way." Dad beamed proudly, "Only the best for my boy." Guests clapped, whistled, congratulated. Daniel embraced Dad dramatically. Photos were snapped from every angle. My breath fogged in the cold as I watched them. Something inside me warmed hope, maybe. Maybe tonight wouldn't be so bad. Maybe I'd finally get a moment of kindness, something that didn't feel like a lesson or a punishment. We went back inside, people buzzing about the car. Dad turned to me. "All right, your turn." My heart lifted just an inch. He reached into his wallet, pulled out a $1 bill and flicked it toward me like someone tossing a coin to a street performer. "Merry Christmas," he said loudly. "Don't spend it all in one place." Laughter exploded around the room. Some people tried to hide it. Most didn't. My face burned. I forced my hand to pick up the dollar, though it felt filthy between my fingers. Then he leaned in so only I could hear. "You were never meant to exist. I wish you'd died at birth." I froze. The air was gone. My chest tightened so hard I couldn't breathe. He stood back up and announced loudly, "All right, everyone, drinks are on me. Let's celebrate." I felt the laughter spinning around me, buzzing like flies. I couldn't look at anyone. I couldn't even look at myself. I turned toward the door, each step heavier than the last. My vision blurred. I needed to leave. I needed air. I needed to get away from this man who had made me feel small my whole life. That was when I felt a hand gently touch my arm. I turned. It was Mr. Halstead, my grandfather's old lawyer. He wasn't dressed for a party gray coat, snow on his shoulders, a leather briefcase in hand. I hadn't even noticed him earlier. He leaned in close and whispered, "Your grandfather wanted you to have this." He slipped a sealed envelope into my hand, thick, heavy, official-looking. "What is it?" I whispered. "Just read it," he said softly. "Tonight if you can." Then he stepped back, disappearing into the crowd as quietly as he'd appeared. I stared at the envelope at my name typed on the front. My hands trembled slightly as I broke the seal. Inside was a letter, and something else. Something that made my breath catch. That was when Dad noticed. He turned toward me, face shifting from smug amusement to sudden fear. He took a stumbling step forward, trying to see the page in my hand. And then, the whiskey glass fell from his fingers and shattered on the floor. The room went dead silent. And everything I thought I knew about my life began to change. I didn't open the letter in that living room. I couldn't. My hands were shaking, my ears were ringing, and my father was staring at the envelope like it might blow up his whole evening. Glass still glittered on the floor. Someone fetched a towel. The music was turned down. The laughter that had roared when he tossed me that $1 had faded into little nervous coughs. Dad tried to laugh it off. "It's fine," he said too loudly. "Accidents happen." But his eyes stayed glued to my hand. I slid the envelope into the inside pocket of my Marine Corps jacket, turned and walked out. No apology, no fake smile. The front door closed behind me, and for the first time that night, I could breathe. Outside, the cold air bit at my cheeks. The Christmas lights on the house twinkled like nothing was wrong. My brother's new Maybach S680 sat in the driveway under a spotlight red bow, glowing like a crown. I walked past it to my old sedan at the curb. When I got in and shut the door, the quiet wrapped around me. My heart was still pounding. The envelope felt heavy against my chest. After a moment, I pulled it out. My name was typed neatly across the front to my granddaughter. That single word, granddaughter, did what no guest in that house had done all evening. It made me feel like I belonged to somebody. My grandfather had been gone a long time. He'd been a Korean War Marine with a limp and a rough voice, the kind of man who could fix a tractor with baling wire and talk to a scared child like she mattered. When my father called me a mistake, Grandpa would just shake his head and say, "The Lord doesn't make mistakes, kiddo. Some people just don't know what they've got." I took a steadying breath, slid my thumb under the flap, and broke the seal. Inside was a folded letter on heavy paper. Behind it, I could feel the edges of other documents, sharper and stiffer, but I set them aside. I needed to hear him first. I turned on the dome light and opened the letter. "Dear kiddo," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm not there to say these things out loud, and your father has probably done something I wish he hadn't." I could see him as I read, sitting at his kitchen table with his chipped mug and his old pen, thinking harder than he let on. "He never understood you," the letter went on. "Truth is, he never understood me either. You and I are the same kind of stubborn. That's a good thing. But in your father's house, it paints a target on your back." My throat tightened. "You were not a mistake," he wrote. "You were a blessing your father didn't know how to handle. He's been carrying his own hurt for a long time, and instead of fixing it, he handed it to you. That shame he throws at you doesn't belong to you. Leave it with him." My eyes blurred. I wiped them on my sleeve and kept going. "I decided a long time ago," the next line read, "that if anything happened to me, I wanted you to have something he couldn't take away in a bad mood or a bad business deal." That sounded exactly like my grandfather, plain, practical, protective. "I've left you more than kind words," the letter continued. "I've left you land, a place with history in its dirt and your name on its gate. The papers behind this letter will explain it. I started the process when you were still a kid and finished it the day you told me you'd joined the Marine Corps. I was proud of you that day in a way I never was proud of your father. He chose comfort, you chose service." I set the letter in my lap and reached back into the envelope. There was a deed stamped and notarized, trust paperwork, a bank certification. My name was printed cleanly on every page, not scribbled in as an afterthought, but built into the documents. Words like sole beneficiary, irrevocable, and not subject to contest jumped out at me. One line made me stop and read it twice. "Upon my death, full ownership transfers to my granddaughter." Then my full name. For a moment, I just stared at it. The car ticked softly as the engine cooled. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a dog barked and fell silent. Inside my little bubble of dome light, it was just me and my grandfather's planning. He had seen this coming. Maybe not the Maybach or the dollar bill, but the heart of it, the cruelty, the favoritism, the way my father used people like pieces on a board. I picked the letter back up. "I know your dad," he'd written. "If he's still around when this reaches you, he won't like it. He may tell you it's unfair. He may tell you that you owe him. He may try to scare you. Don't let him. This isn't his to approve. This is between you and me." At the bottom, the handwriting slanted just a little more. "When the time comes," he wrote, "go to the place listed on the deed. Don't wait for permission. Don't ask your father what he thinks. Just go. The land will tell you the rest. And if I know you like, I think I do, kiddo, you'll know what to do with it." He'd signed his full name, then added one small word under it, in parentheses, Grandpa. I held the paper against my chest and shut my eyes. I thought of all the years I'd sat quietly at family gatherings while Dad praised my brother and picked at me. All the times he'd used my uniform to impress his friends, but never once asked what I'd seen overseas. All the times I'd gone back anyway, hoping this year might be different. Someone else had been paying attention. I opened my eyes and lifted the deed. The address near the top belonged to a county I barely recognized. Not near my base, not near my father, rural, out toward the edge of the state. I pulled out my phone, opened the Maps app, and typed the address in. 3 hours away, past the neighborhoods and shopping centers, past the exits I knew by heart, out where the map turned mostly green. A thin blue line traced the route. Don't wait for permission. I started the engine. As I backed away from the curb, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Through the big front window, I could see my father standing near the tree phone in one hand, drink in the other, shoulders tight. Even from that distance, I knew he was already plotting. For the first time, the thought didn't make me feel small. I was his daughter, yes, but I was also my grandfather's granddaughter, and I was a Marine. This wasn't just about a cruel Christmas toast. It was a beginning. And my first objective was clear get to the land my grandfather had left me, and find out why he believed it could change everything. The highway was almost empty as I drove through the dark, the taillights of the occasional pickup disappearing into the winter night. The farther I got from my father's manicured suburb, the more the world quieted. Streetlights gave way to long stretches of blacktop lined with fields, barns, and the silhouettes of old oak trees. Snow dusted the ground in thin, patchy streaks, just enough to glitter under the moonlight. 3 hours felt like 6. My grandfather's letter kept replaying in my mind, every sentence stitching something together in me that had been torn for years. I wasn't sure if I was nervous, scared, or strangely hopeful, maybe all three. When I finally turned off the main road, my headlights swept across a wooden sign hanging from 2 posts. It took me a second to realize the name carved into it was familiar. Willow Creek Ranch. My grandfather's handwriting had been copied into the wood decades ago. I followed the dirt drive slowly, the crunch of gravel steady beneath my tires. After a minute or two, the ranch house came into view, a long, low structure with a wide porch and a metal roof that gleamed faintly in the moonlight. Lights were on in the front windows. Smoke curled from the chimney. Someone was awake. I parked near the old hitching post, stepped out, and pulled my jacket tighter against the cold. Before I could knock, the front door opened with a soft creak. An elderly man stepped out wearing a flannel shirt, worn jeans, and a pair of boots that looked older than half the people at my father's party. A wool cap sat crooked on his head. His face was weathered deep lines, sunspots, a jaw that had seen more stubbornness than most, but his eyes were warm. He didn't look surprised to see me. "You must be her," he said gently. "Her?" I asked. He nodded once. "Your granddad told me you'd come, maybe not when, but someday." I swallowed hard. "You knew him well." "Knew him. I worked this land with him for 40 years. He saved my life twice, and I watched him love you more than I ever saw him love anything." His words hit me so hard I couldn't speak. He pushed the door open wider. "Come in, it's cold out here." I stepped inside. The warmth hit me instantly, wood stove heat, the kind that sinks into your bones. The living room looked exactly like the kind of place my grandfather would have kept simple furniture walls, lined with old photographs, shelves full of folded blankets and tools. A quilt hung over the back of the sofa. The man motioned toward a seat. "Name's Hank, by the way. I still look after the place. Promised your granddad I would." I sat down slowly. I didn't even know he had a place like this. He kept it quiet for a reason. That caught my attention. Why? Hank lowered himself into a chair with a soft grunt. Because if your father had known, he'd have tried to take it. I didn't argue. That sounded exactly like my father. He didn't want the land, Hank went on. He wanted control. And your granddad wasn't about to hand him anything he didn't earn. Hank stood and walked to a wooden box on a shelf. It was old and square with brass corners. He carried it over carefully and set it on the coffee table. He left this for you, he said. Told me not to open it. Said you'd know when you were ready. My hands trembled a little as I lifted the lid. Inside were 3 things. A stack of journals tied with a leather cord, a small velvet pouch, a folded piece of paper with my name written on it in my grandfather's handwriting. I opened the paper first. Kiddo, it said everything you need to understand is in these pages. Don't rush. Read, rest, walk the land. Let it talk to you. Beneath that, take care of Hank. He watches over this place like I would. I smiled a little, my first real smile since leaving my father's house. I untied the leather cord. The journals were old pages, yellowed handwriting slanted from years of arthritis. The entries started decades ago, long before I was born, but some were from just a few years back. I turned to one of the entries dated around the time I joined the Marine Corps. I knew she'd do it, he'd written. Takes grit to join up these days. She's got more grit in her thumb than her father has in his whole body. I prayed he wouldn't break her before she had a chance to see her worth. I blinked hard. Another tear formed before I could stop it. Hank cleared his throat softly. He talked about you all the time. Said you were the one member of the family who understood honor. I exhaled a shaky breath. He never said any of this to me. That's because he knew it'd make your father worse. And he wasn't about to put that weight on you. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I asked the question I'd avoided for years. Why did my father hate me so much? Hank leaned back, folding his arms. Your dad always wanted a son first, someone to mold into his image. But your brother was born sickly, weak. Your father blamed himself, felt like a failure. I frowned. Then I came along. And you weren't weak, Hank said quietly. You were strong from the start. Loud lungs, fierce eyes. Your mother joked you came out ready to run. Your father saw that strength and it shamed him. That makes no sense, I whispered. Oh, it does, Hank said. Your father measures everything in power. Control. He couldn't control you, not even as a baby. And he sure couldn't control you once you grew up. So he punished you for it. I sat back, letting the truth settle. It didn't excuse anything he'd done. But it explained what decades of silence never had. I reached into the velvet pouch and felt something cold and metal. I pulled it out slowly. It was my grandfather's dog tags. The ones he'd worn in Korea, bent on the edges, scratched heavy with meaning. I closed my fingers around them. Why leave these to me? I asked softly. Hank smiled. Because you followed in his footsteps. Because you had the courage he always wished your father had found. I looked at the journals, the dog tags, the deed I'd brought with me. Every piece fit together like a puzzle I never knew existed. My grandfather had been building this moment for years, preparing me, protecting me, believing in me. Your dad's gonna show up here, Hank warned gently. He won't take this lying down. I know, I said. And what are you gonna do when he does? I closed my hand around the dog tags. The metal warmed against my skin. I'm going to follow orders, I said quietly. Whose orders? My grandfather's? Hank nodded, once satisfied. Then you're ready. I wasn't sure if that was true, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I might be. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay on the old couch in my grandfather's living room with a blanket pulled up to my chin, watching the shadows from the fireplace dance across the ceiling. The journals were stacked beside me, and I kept reaching out every so often just to touch them, as if to reassure myself they were real. Around dawn, I stepped outside with a cup of coffee Hank had brewed. The sun was a pale line on the horizon, painting the fields with a faint glow. The air smelled like frost and wood smoke. It was peaceful, so peaceful it made the chaos of the night before feel like something from another lifetime. But peace never lasts long when my father is involved. I heard the tires before I saw the car. The crunch of gravel, the low growl of an engine pushing harder than necessary. I turned just in time to see my father's silver SUV barreling down the drive, the headlights cutting through the early morning haze. Hank stepped out onto the porch behind me. "He's early," he muttered. I didn't move. I just watched the SUV skid to a stop a few feet from the porch. Dad slammed the door open so hard it swung back and bounced. He stormed toward us, red-faced, eyes bloodshot, dressed in the same clothes from the night before. He must not have slept either. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he shouted. I stayed standing where I was. "Good morning to you too." "Don't get smart with me," he snapped. He jabbed a finger toward the house. "You stole something that doesn't belong to you." I exhaled slowly. "If you mean the envelope, I didn't steal anything. Grandpa left it for me." "He left you nothing," Dad barked. "Nothing you were never supposed to get." Hank stepped forward. "Careful, Richard." Dad glared at him. "Stay out of this. You worked for me too, remember?" Hank didn't flinch. "I worked for your father, and I honored his wishes. You'd do well to do the same." My father turned back to me, unhinged fury simmering behind his eyes. "You think you can come out here and play the hero, think this place belongs to you? You're dreaming. This land is part of our family holdings. That means it's mine." "No," I said calmly, "it's not." "I know what's mine," he roared so loud a flock of crows lifted from a nearby tree. I took a breath and reached into my jacket. I pulled out the deed and held it out to him, then read it. He snatched it from my hand and scanned it. His eyes narrowed. This is altered. This can't be right." "It's notarized," I said. "Legal, binding." "It's fraud," he spat. "It has to be." Hank folded his arms. "Your father made sure it wasn't." Dad shook his head. No. I've run this family's business for 30 years. I know every asset, every acre, every penny. If there was land in her name, I'd know." "That's the point," I said. "He didn't want you to know." Dad's jaw clenched so hard the muscles stood out. "You are not taking anything from me." "I'm not taking anything," I said softly. "I was given something. There's a difference." He stepped closer, invading my space. "After everything I've done for this family, after everything I've built, you think I'm going to let a mistake?" "That's enough," Hank said firmly, stepping between us. But I didn't need protecting, not anymore. I stepped forward on my own. "You can call me a mistake all you want," I said, voice steady. "But Grandpa didn't think so, and legally neither does this deed." He laughed, but it came out more like a choke. "You think you're tough because you wear a uniform, because you run around playing soldier." I stiffened but held my ground. "I'm not playing anything." "Then listen closely," he said, leaning in. "You either hand this place over or I will burn it to the ground." Hank inhaled sharply. "Richard." "I mean it," my father hissed. "I will not be undermined by my own daughter." Something inside me snapped, not violently but cleanly, like a cable pulled too tight for too long, finally giving way. "For years," I said quietly, "I let you decide who I was. I let you tell me I wasn't enough, that I wasn't wanted, that I wasn't worthy." He folded his arms with smug satisfaction. I took another step toward him. "But you don't get to define me anymore." His smile faltered. "I know who I am," I said. "I'm your daughter, yes, but I'm also a Marine, and I am Robert Hayes's granddaughter. I'm not giving this land up, not to you, not to anyone." He stared at me like he didn't recognize me. Then he snarled, "We'll see what a judge has to say." He spun around, stormed to his SUV, ripped the door open and threw himself inside. Gravel shot out from under the tires as he sped away down the drive. Hank let out a long breath. "He's going to challenge it." "I know." Hank looked at me with something like pity and something like pride. "He'll bring in lawyers, lots of them." "I know." "And you'll be dragged through hearings." "I've been through worse," I said. "In the Marines, if someone fires at you, you keep moving." He nodded. "Your granddad would be proud." I hoped that was true. I went back inside and sat at the table with the deed and the journals spread out in front of me. I grabbed my phone and called the number on the business card Mr. Halstead had slipped into the envelope. He answered on the second ring. "I was expecting your call." "My father's going to fight this," I said. "Yes," he replied calmly. "He filed notice an hour ago." My throat tightened. "That fast?" "He was waiting for you to react," Mr. Halstead said. "He's always been predictable, but your grandfather knew that." "Can he overturn the trust?" No, but he can drag you through the mud trying. I closed my eyes. Then what do I do? You do what Marines do best, he said. You prepare, and you stand your ground. When I hung up, Hank placed a warm hand on my shoulder. You're not alone, he said. This land has your back, your grandfather has your back, and I do too. I looked down at the deed at my name printed clearly at the dog tags resting beside it. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't fighting uphill anymore. But I also knew my father wasn't done. The real battle was coming. And I was ready for it. I spent the next morning sitting at my grandfather's old kitchen table, the journals spread out in a loose circle around me like a map of everything he'd ever tried to teach me. Outside, frost clung to the windows. Inside, the wood stove popped and cracked, keeping the room warm enough that I didn't need a jacket. I was reading through a journal from 20 years ago when Hank shuffled in carrying 2 mugs of coffee. You're up early, he said. Couldn't sleep much, I replied, too much on my mind. Court dates'll do that. I took the mug and wrapped both hands around it. Do you think I'm doing the right thing, holding my ground? Hank pulled out a chair opposite me and sat down slowly. Your grandfather once told me something I'll never forget. It's not about the fight, he said. It's about whether you can look at yourself afterward and know you didn't back down from what mattered. You're not fighting out of spite. You're standing up because you finally can. I nodded, though the weight of it still pressed on me. I opened the next journal. Inside was an entry written in darker ink, maybe on a day when Grandpa's hands had been steady. Kiddo will need strength, he'd written. Life won't give it to her gently, but she already has more grit than her father ever could understand. This land is hers because she'll respect it, because she'll protect it. I traced the words with my finger, feeling something warm bloom in my chest. Before I could read more, my phone buzzed on the table. It was my brother. I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. Daniel. His voice was quiet, hesitant. Hey, are you at the ranch? Yeah, I said. A long pause. Dad's losing it. He's been yelling since sunrise. He thinks you're going to ruin everything. I'm not trying to ruin anything. I know, he said quickly. I know, okay, Look, I didn't know about what he said to you last night. I didn't hear it. I didn't see the dollar thing until afterward, I swear. It was the first time in a long time he sounded like the brother I grew up with, instead of the polished man our father had molded. I believe you, I said. Another long silence. You're really going to fight him, he finally asked. I don't have much of a choice. He exhaled shakily. I don't want to be in the middle of this. You don't have to pick sides. But he sighed, and I knew he didn't believe that. In our family, neutrality was never an option. I should go, he said. Dad's meeting with lawyers all day. He's talking about, I don't even know. Just be careful, okay? I will. After we hung up, Hank sat back with a knowing look. Your brother's scared of the man your father becomes when he feels threatened. I know. I took a sip of coffee, but this time I'm not the one who's scared. By noon, I was sitting in the office of Mr. Halstead, the family lawyer. His office wasn't in a big city. It wasn't sleek or modern. It was one of those modest brick buildings near the county courthouse, the kind built in the 70s and never fully updated. The waiting room smelled faintly of old paper and lemon polish. But something about the place felt honest. When he waved me into his office, I saw stacks of documents already laid out across his desk. He adjusted his glasses. Your father moved quickly. He's challenging the trust, the deed, and the property transfer. He's claiming coercion, elder fraud, and lack of capacity. I blinked. Coercion, elder fraud. I wasn't even there when Grandpa signed anything. Your father is hoping the court won't care about facts, Halstead said dryly. He's hoping they'll care about his name. I let out a humorless laugh. That sounds like him. Halstead leaned back. The good news, the documents your grandfather created are strong. Extremely strong. He worked with attorneys who specialize in elder law. He updated them regularly. And the medical certifications attached to his last update ironclad. So, I'll win. You'll win legally, he corrected. But you'll still have to go through the battle. There will be hearings, depositions, public scrutiny, and your father will get uglier before he gets tired. My stomach tightened, but I nodded. I can handle that. I know you can, Halstead said. But I want you to be ready. Your father doesn't fight clean." I thought of the cruel words he'd thrown at me my entire life, of the way he tossed me that dollar like a joke, of the way his face had gone gray when he realized what Grandpa had done. "I'm already ready," I said. Halstead gave a single approving nod. "Your grandfather believed in you. Now let's make sure his wishes are honored." That evening I returned to the ranch. Hank was feeding the horses, and I joined him, the cold air misting around our breaths. The horses were gentle, brushing against my shoulder as if sensing something unsettled inside me. "You don't come from weak stock," Hank said without looking at me. "Your granddad fought battles that didn't make the newspapers. You'll fight yours too." I ran my hand through a horse's mane. "I'm not scared of the courtroom. I'm scared of what this will do to him, to all of us." "That's because you've still got a heart," Hank said. "Your father's forgotten what that feels like." We didn't talk much after that. Sometimes the quiet says enough. 2 nights later, I got a surprise. I was sitting at the kitchen table when headlights swept across the window. My heart jumped, but when the knock came, it was gentle. I opened the door. Daniel stood there, hands shoved in his coat pockets, eyes tired. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. He looked around the ranch house slowly, like he'd stepped into a memory he never knew existed. He ran his fingers across the mantel where Grandpa's photo hung. "This place is, I don't know, peaceful." "It was his sanctuary," I said. He nodded. Dad knew about this place. My breath caught. "What?" He knew, Daniel repeated softly. "He just never told you. Grandpa cut Dad out of the plans years ago. Dad never got over it." It hit me like a punch. All the bitterness, all the cruelty, all the ways he tried to make me feel small. It wasn't about me being weak. It was about me being chosen. Daniel swallowed. "He's not going to stop, you know." "I know. But..." He hesitated. "If you need me in court, I'll be there. I can't undo what he's done. But I can at least tell the truth." Emotion tightened my throat. "Thank you." He gave a small nod. "You've always been stronger than me. Now I see why Grandpa trusted you." When he left, I closed the door quietly. For the first time since this started, I didn't feel alone. The battle was coming, but I had allies now, Grandpa's words, Hank's steadiness, Daniel's truth. And I had something my father never counted on. Courage. On the morning of the hearing, I parked across from the county courthouse and sat a moment with the engine off, watching my breath fog the windshield. I had faced live fire ranges and screaming drill instructors, but somehow this brick building with its worn steps felt worse. Inside, the place smelled like coffee and floor wax. People waited on benches with folders pressed to their chests, custody disputes, traffic tickets, landlords and tenants. Just another Tuesday in American life. And in the middle of it, my father and me on opposite sides of a file. I wore a plain navy dress and blazer, my dog tags tucked under my blouse where I could feel them. No uniform. This wasn't the Corps' fight. It was mine. Dad arrived right on time in a dark suit, and the expensive confidence he wore like cologne. His lawyer, a tall man with perfect hair and a leather briefcase, walked at his shoulder. They stopped when they saw me. "You still have time to do the sensible thing," my father said quietly. "Sign the ranch back. We'll keep this in the family. No judges, no humiliation." I met his eyes. The humiliation started at Christmas, not here. Something flickered across his face, wounded pride, then anger. "You don't understand what you're playing with," he snapped. "I understand that Grandpa made a decision," I said. "And for once, I'm not backing down." His lawyer touched his elbow. "We need to go in, Mr. Hayes." The courtroom was smaller than television makes it look. A few worn benches, the flag the judge's bench raised, just enough to remind you who answers to whom. Hank sat in the second row, hat in his hands. When I walked in, he straightened and gave me one steady nod. Daniel sat beside him, pale and tense eyes on the floor. I took my seat at counsel table with Mr. Halstead. He leaned over. "Just breathe," he murmured. "The paper is on your side." We all rose when the judge came in, a woman in her 60s with gray hair pulled back and tired, intelligent eyes. She looked like she'd seen everything twice and didn't have patience for nonsense. We sat, and Dad's lawyer went first. He talked about my father's decades of stewardship over the family business, how the ranch had always been treated as part of that whole. He called my grandfather confused in his later years, suggested there had been undue influence from people who stood to gain. Then his tone shifted and he glanced my way. He called me frequently absent due to military service, emotionally distant, not involved in the family's day-to-day affairs. He never said ungrateful, but the word hung in the air. When it was our turn, Halstead stood. He didn't make a speech. He laid out the trust and the deed the way you lay out tools on a bench, one by one in order. Original documents, amendments, medical certifications, notarizations. He took the judge through the signatures, the dates, the clear language naming me as sole beneficiary of the ranch and associated trust. Then he called Hank. Hank walked to the stand, left his hat on the table, raised his right hand. Once he was sworn, Halstead asked Mr. Walters, "How long did you know Mr. Robert Hayes?" "About 40 years, Hank said. Worked this land with him near every day." "How was his mind when he signed these last documents?" "Sharp," Hank replied. "He forgot where he put his glasses sometimes. He never forgot who he wanted to have what." "Did he ever talk about his granddaughter?" Halstead asked, nodding toward me. "All the time," Hank said. Said she had his backbone. Said he wanted her to have one thing nobody could yank away from her when they were in a bad mood." Dad's lawyer tried to rattle him on cross-examination, hinting that Hank benefited from me keeping the ranch. Hank just shook his head. "I get paid to fix fences," he said. "I'd have done that whether she showed up or not. I'm here 'cause I owe the old man the truth." A faint ripple of quiet amusement moved through the benches. Even the judge's mouth twitched. Then it was my turn. I walked to the stand, raised my hand, and swore in. My palms left faint, damp marks on the wood rail. Halstead kept it simple. My name, my age, my service in the Marine Corps. That I'd never asked my grandfather to change anything. That I didn't know about the ranch being in my name until the night of the Christmas party. That the envelope in that crowded living room had been the first hint. "What do you want out of this?" he asked finally. "I want to honor what my grandfather put in writing," I said. "And I want to be able to look at myself afterward." Dad's lawyer came up slowly. "Captain," he said, putting weight on the title, "you've been away from this area most of your adult life, haven't you?" "Yes," I said. "The Marines station you where they need you." "And when you have come home, you haven't worked in your father's business or on this ranch, correct?" "That's correct." "So the only real connection you have to this property is a stack of papers and some fond memories of your grandfather." I met his eyes. "The connection I have is his signature." He knew what he was doing. He watched me for a heartbeat, then said no further questions. When both sides rested, the judge sat back and read in silence. The only sounds were the faint rustle of paper and someone coughing in the back row. Finally, she set the file down. "This court has reviewed the trust instruments, the deed, and the supporting medical records," she said. "They are clear, consistent, and properly executed. Mr. Hayes, your father, had the right to decide how to dispose of his property. He exercised that right. Your objections are not supported by the evidence." My father's shoulders sagged just a fraction. "The trust and deed are upheld in full," she continued. "Legal ownership of the ranch and associated trust assets rests with the granddaughter named therein." A slow breath left my chest. Behind me I heard Hank exhale. Daniel shifted like someone had finally set down a heavy box he'd been forced to carry. Then the judge looked directly at my father. "Mr. Hayes, she said you may not like your father's choices. Many children don't. But attempting to use this court to strip your own child of what was clearly and carefully left to her is troubling. Favoritism within a family is not illegal. The pattern of cruelty described here is not illegal either, but it does speak volumes." He stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. She turned to Halstead. "Counsel, you mentioned possible issues with Mr. Hayes's handling of family and business funds." "Yes, Your Honor," he said. "There may be grounds for a separate action." She nodded, then looked at me. "Ms. Hayes," she said, "given what I've heard, you would be within your rights to pursue additional legal remedies against your father regarding misuse of assets or breach of duty. I will not tell you whether you should. But I will ask you for the record." The room seemed to narrow until it was just her, my father, and me. "Do you intend," she asked, "to pursue further action against him beyond this matter?" Silence settled over the room. I could feel my father's stare like a weight between my shoulder blades. I could feel Hank's quiet support behind me. I thought of my grandfather's journals, his dog tags in my pocket, the way he'd written, "The shame he throws at you doesn't belong to you." All my life, my father had decided what I was worth. For the first time, the decision sat in my hands. The judge's question hung in the air like cold breath on a winter morning. Do you intend to pursue further action against him beyond this matter? The courtroom was silent. Even the old clock on the wall seemed to pause mid-tick. My father sat stiffly beside his attorney, jaw-clenched, eyes fixed straight ahead. For the first time, he didn't look invincible. He looked scared. Or maybe he finally realized I wasn't going to fold the way I always had. I inhaled slowly, feeling the dog tags under my blouse, the familiar weight grounding me. My grandfather had faced things far harder than this, and he'd done it with honor. The question wasn't whether I could win a deeper fight. It was whether I needed to. I lifted my chin and spoke clearly. No, Your Honor, I won't pursue additional action. A few heads turned. Even the judge looked mildly surprised. I continued, I want what my grandfather left me, nothing more. And I won't use the law to destroy my father even if I have the grounds to. I'm standing my ground, nothing beyond that. The judge studied me for a long moment, then nodded with a sort of respectful approval. Very well. The court respects your decision. She tapped her gavel. This matter is concluded. A soft murmur rippled through the room as people stood. Papers rustled, feet shuffled, the bailiff held the door open. It felt like the world exhaled all at once. My father didn't move. His lawyer whispered something to him, but he didn't respond. His hands were folded tight in front of him, knuckles white. I'd never seen him look so small. I turned toward the aisle. Hank stood waiting, hat in hand, offering me a proud nod. Daniel stepped forward and touched my shoulder gently. You did the right thing, he whispered. I hope so, I said. Then, as I gathered my things, I sensed someone behind me. I turned. My father stood there looking older than I remembered, shoulders sagging, tie, slightly crooked, pride stripped away. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he cleared his throat. I didn't expect mercy. I didn't do it for you, I replied softly. I did it so I could live with myself. He swallowed, eyes darting downward. I was wrong about you. I didn't know what to say to that. I wasn't sure he even understood the depth of damage he'd done. But he looked genuinely shaken, like the foundations he'd built his whole life on had finally shifted out from under him. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I really am. It wasn't enough to erase years of wounds, but it was more than he had ever offered before. And maybe it was the beginning of something better, if not today, then someday. I nodded once. Take care of yourself. He nodded back just barely. Then he turned and walked away, not triumphant, not angry, just human. Outside the courthouse, the winter sun had climbed a little higher, warming the stone steps. People came and went, cars hummed along the street, and life moved forward in its steady American way. Hank put his arm around my shoulders. Your grandfather would have been real proud. Think so. I know so, he said, patting my back. He didn't raise you, but he sure shaped you. Daniel approached, hands in his pockets, face softer than I'd seen in years. I meant what I said, he told me. I'm on your side in all this. I know, I replied, and I'm glad. You going back to the ranch? I nodded. Yeah, there's a lot I still need to read. He hesitated. I might visit, if that's okay. Something warm settled in my chest. It's okay. We hugged, an awkward, unfamiliar hug, but a real one. When he stepped back, he looked relieved, like a weight he'd carried since childhood had finally been set down. I watched him walk toward his car, then turned to Hank. Ready, he asked. More than I've ever been. The drive back to the ranch felt different this time, not like an escape, but a homecoming. When I pulled up the gravel drive, I rolled the window down and let the cold air sweep in. The fields glowed in the afternoon light. The fences were old but sturdy. The porch creaked gently in the breeze. Inside, I set my bag down and walked straight to the wooden box of journals. I opened the one on top, flipping to a page marked with a faded ribbon. Kiddo, my grandfather had written. If you're reading this after a hard fight, remember something important. Revenge is easy. Mercy is harder. Mercy takes strength. And strength is what our family forgot until you came along. I closed the journal, letting those words settle deep. I walked outside to the edge of the property where the land sloped gently toward a line of trees. The sky was streaked with orange and gold, the sun dipping low. I could almost see him, my grandfather, leaning on the fence post, watching me with that half-smile he always had. "I hope I honored you today," I whispered. The wind rustled the grass. I took it as a yes. As I headed back toward the house, my phone buzzed with a notification. I ignored it for a moment and just watched the sky deepen into the soft blue of early evening. This ranch wasn't just land, it was a second chance, a legacy, a responsibility. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I had stepped into a future that belonged to me, not the one my father tried to force on me, not the one I ran from, but the one my grandfather envisioned. A future shaped by dignity, not bitterness, by strength, not cruelty, by forgiveness, not fear. Before I went inside, I stood still for a final quiet moment and breathed in the crisp air. I had fought, I had won, and I had chosen mercy. That was the real victory. If you're listening to this and you've ever felt small in your own family, or overlooked, or told you didn't matter, just know this. Your worth isn't decided by the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes it's decided by the quiet choices you make when no one is watching. And if you found something meaningful in my story, I'd love for you to share where you're listening from, or even pass this along to someone who needs to hear it. It helps more than you know. Thank you for spending this time with me, and remember, dignity, kindness, and courage, they never go out of style. 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 Out of style.